Hey, I'm John. Welcome to the Last Tuesday show for January 2021. In this month's show, I've got some questions and answers. There's a look at a model that I've recently completed as a Patreon exclusive build. I'll do a little bit of shop talk and we'll talk about thinning acrylic paints. And then I've got an interview with Zach Rensberger, otherwise known as ZakuAurelius, that I think you're really going to enjoy. One of the reasons that I like using water-based acrylic paints for a lot of my work is they're just so simple and flexible. Whether it's just grabbing a bottle and shaking it up, well, actually I use my electric stirrer, but getting it stirred up and putting some on my palette and putting in a few drops of thinner and getting to work, or putting it through my airbrush. It's so easy to use. There's no odor involved. The toxicity is very low, and they're just so easy to find nowadays. There's a lot of great things about acrylic paints that can help you in building your models. Now, a question that I'm asked from time to time is, what do you thin your acrylic paints with? And unlike, say, lacquer paints, where it's generally lacquer thinner, that's what you thin it with. I mean, there may be some different varieties of it, but it's pretty much lacquer thinner. With acrylic paints, there's a lot more in terms of options that we have available to us. Now, obviously, water is the simplest. It's simple, it's cheap. You know, if you're anywhere in the world, you have to have water to live. So you've got some kind of water. And so thinning them with water is always a great option. I do that a lot. However, with water, sometimes if we over thin the paints, it can start pulling the pigments, the binder, the stuff in the paint apart. And when we put it on our model, it can leave a patchy appearance. It can leave like almost a clumpy appearance. Now, sometimes that's cool to take advantage of for weathering and things like that, but for the most part, if we're trying to really thin them down, sometimes too much water can be a bad thing. So there's some other products that I like to keep on hand that help me out in different scenarios. Now, one that I like to use is Vallejo airbrush thinner. It's a great all-around, all-purpose product. It's mostly water, but it has one component in it that helps the paint not break up quite as much. It helps it adhere to itself, I guess you'd say, a little better. And that's a chemical called butyl cellulose, often called 2-butyl. Now, I'm no chemist. I don't know what all that means. I can look it up on Wikipedia and it shows me a molecular diagram and I go, okay, that looks great. But I know that it does help not only with putting your paint through an airbrush, but using it to thin for brush painting. This is a good kind of general purpose fallback for just about anything. So if you're, and most acrylic paints that have their own thinner, it's going to be some form generally of something like the 2-butyl. It may not be that exact thing, but it's going to be very similar. In fact, here's a bonus tip. I found the material safety data sheets for the Vallejo thinner, and I also got some for Mission Models paints and a couple of others that let me know that, okay, yes, this is the chemical they use. And generally, depending on the manufacturer, they're going to have a percentage of maybe 7% up to about 15% of that 2-butyl. And we can take advantage of that. Here's my much beat up bottle of butyl cellulose. Butyl cellulose. Yeah. It's made up of, it's a startled chemical. Get it? Oh, never mind. Anyway, I got this, 32 ounces of this stuff was about 20 bucks. I've been making my own, I guess you'd say, thinner for a couple of years. All I do is I get a gallon of distilled water, I pull out 12 ounces of water, I put in 12 ounces of this stuff, and it works great. And the wonderful thing is, I was able to calculate that for the price of one of those big bottles of the Vallejo airbrush thinner, with this, I can make about 60 bottles. And those Vallejo airbrush thinners run about $10, $15, depending on where you get them. This was 20. You do the math. But this has worked wonderfully. So if you're adventuresome, this is something to look at. Another Vallejo product I like to make use of is this airbrush flow improver. It definitely helps when airbrushing, but it's also very useful when you're brush painting, especially if I'm painting a larger area and I need to mix up a bigger batch of paint. Putting a few drops of this in will help extend the life of it and keep it supple so you can get some good paint time out of it. It's not the primary thing that I use, but when I'm mixing up a large batch, I'll throw in a little of this, and it really does help it. Another product that's great for thinning acrylic paints is Citadel's Lamian Medium. Now, what this essentially is paint without pigment. It's all of the water and the binder and all of the stuff that goes into an acrylic paint. There's just no pigment in it. The benefit of using this is when you thin your paints with this, you're adding essentially paint to paint. And that helps thin it out, but it doesn't break apart the pigments the way water can when you add a lot of water. So you can thin things down way more with this than you can with water and still get good results. I was watching Vince Venturella's YouTube channel, and he recommended this Liquitex Flow Aid. And he mentioned that this stuff is different from the Flow Improver because Flow Improver is not Flow Aid. Now, I don't know the chemical makeup of any of this, but when I used it, I noticed what he was talking about. Just a drop or two of this in any paint when you're trying to paint some real fine detail, it makes the paint flow off of your brush really well. It doesn't overly thin the paint, but it makes it just really flow nicely. So if you're trying to freehand some designs or some detail or something like that, and you really need to get in there with your brush and just do some fine work, and you don't want to have to keep doing brush stroke after brush stroke to try and get it on there when you're really trying to do it precisely, this stuff is great for that. I've really enjoyed using it. What I do is I just decant a little of it into a little essentially empty Vallejo dropper bottle, and I just put in one drop to maybe 2 or 3 brushfuls of paint, and I'll use a little bit of one of my other thinners. But this is a really good product to have for those situations where you're wanting really precise paint flow. Now, another way that you can thin your paint and still get really good performance and really punch up the colors in some ways is to use inks. Now, this is some Vallejo Game Color ink, but there's loads of different inks on the market. And they even make white ink that you can use that can help lighten colors up. But inks are really vivid in terms of their color, but their opacity is kind of way down the scale. So you can, of course, use just straight ink thinned with all of the same things that I'm talking about to paint something. But mixing a little bit of ink in with your paint can help not only change the color of it, but it'll thin it down and give a really nice coverage, and it'll kind of bring that opacity down, but you won't lose the color intensity. So having some inks on hand is a really good tool to have. I don't use them a lot, but when I do use them, they are perfect for the job. For the longest time, I had used a mix of the airbrush flow improver and the homemade thinner that I talked about earlier for my general thinning. And it worked fine. I didn't have any problems with it. But I was watching Midwinter Minis, their channel one time, and Guy, who is the host of that channel, mentioned that he keeps a bottle that's half water and half this Liquitex matte medium. And I thought, that sounds reasonable. So I got a little bit of the matte medium and mixed it with water. And the next time I painted with acrylics, I thinned it down and it worked great. So I went and got the bigger bottle because I paint with acrylics a lot, and I just keep a dropper bottle, not a dropper bottle, I keep a squirt bottle, almost to, you know, those bottles of ketchup you get in restaurants? I keep that on hand just about. It's about that size because I use acrylics a lot. It is a great all-purpose thinner too. In fact, of all the ones that I've talked about, if you said, I just want to settle on one, especially for brush painting, airbrushing is a little different, but for brush painting, a 50-50 mix of this and water really is some great stuff, and I'd highly recommend it. You can find, it doesn't have to be the Liquitex brand of matte medium. Any art supply store is going to have some kind of matte medium. And so it's, while this single bottle, I think this bottle was maybe $13, $14, which is kind of expensive for a single purchase thing of some liquid, but it's a big bottle. It's 16 ounces. That's going to make up a lot of medium for me to thin my paints. So it's a really, really good option. Now, to wrap up this little shop talk about thinning your acrylic paints, I think the main thing to keep in mind is that each of these behaves just a little differently. There's not one that is way over here in terms of the way it works, and then another one that's way over here. They're all in a fairly tight envelope, but each has its own application, and sometimes in combination with other things have their own application. My recommendation would be to try as many of these as you feel comfortable and are able to try, because they're going to give you tools in your toolbox. And by that I mean, you know, it's great to have, let's say, to use that toolbox metaphor, it's great to have a screwdriver, but there may be times when you need something different than what the screwdriver is you have. Like if you need a Phillips head screwdriver and all that you have is a slot screwdriver, you need another tool. Having a whole bunch of screwdrivers in your toolbox is a good thing. It's the same way when it comes to thinning your acrylic paints. Having a variety of mediums on hand that help you thin the paints for different situations is going to be very critical in giving you the ability to get the performance out of the paints that you want in different scenarios. Because, and it takes experience, and I don't say that meaning you've got to spend years and years doing it, but you use each of these and you kind of see what it does and you test it in different scenarios so that you know, okay, if I'm going to be painting some really fine lines and details, I want to use a little bit of that, you know, flow aid. If I'm doing the more general thinning, yeah, maybe I just want to use the 2-butyl based stuff, or the matte medium and water mix. So there can be different scenarios, or the inks. You know, the inks provide their own benefit, but having some or all of these standing by to do specific tasks will just help you achieve the finish that you're looking for on the model. And the great thing is, none of these are so chemically volatile that you're going to have to worry too much about the odor or, you know, anything like that. I can't tell you the number of times I've been working with these, and you know, I would accidentally stick my brush over my coffee water, and well, I just keep drinking the coffee, you know. And I'm a admitted brush licker, so I'll use some of this stuff and lick the brush, and I think I'm okay. We'll see. Anyway, hope this has helped you with some ideas on thinning your acrylic paints. This is a model that I recently finished as a Patreon exclusive build. The $5 and $10 level on Patreon, I do exclusive builds just for those patrons, where I go through building and painting and weathering a model just like I do in the regular YouTube series, but it's different models. There's just basically additional content. This one was a 6-part series that I went through the whole model, how to get it together, how to paint it and weather it. This is Rocket Models 1/35th scale Kabuto-Kai. It's from their Fist of War series, which is basically it's an imagined scenario that World War II went on for a couple of more years, and the combatants in the war came up with these mechanized, these walking mecha tanks like this, and they were in the conflict. So that's what the basis of this is. When I painted it, in my mind during the whole build, I really didn't have it in mind as a World War II thing, but was imagining it being from the Maschinen Krieger universe. If you're familiar with Maschinen Krieger, you'll recognize that black cat decal there as being one of the straw decals. I had thought about putting it on a base with some 1/35 scale Maschinen Krieger fighting suits, but to be honest, I just kind of lost steam on the project. So when I finished this model, I said, okay, it's just a walking tank thing that's painted different. So it is what it is. It's a fun kit to build. There are a few challenges with it. The fit is not great. It's not awful, but there are a few places where you have to do some sanding and some shimming in a couple of places, some gap filling, things like that, especially along the hull here, the main hull. There's just a few places where things join together where it's not, it's generally good, but it's not precisely good. So I had to take some steps to just seal those up. It's nothing that if you've built a few models and sealed a few seams, you won't have any problems with it. But it does take just a little bit of planning to get it together without any major gaps on it. Now, one of the cool features I like about this is it's got a full interior, but of course you'd have no way of seeing it except they handily made it so that this part can rotate up and you can look inside the model and see the interior, the crew compartment. So it's got some nice little parts in there, and it was real fun to paint and detail and to weather and all of that. It's almost a kit within a kit, so that made it a great value, I think. Now, the way I built this to make it easy to do all the painting and weathering is I actually did it in sub-assemblies. I had the guns off, and I had the forward and the rear leg units built as as separate units. In other words, there was this forward section was together and this rear section was together. The guns were off and the hull was separate. And that made building this, painting it, weathering it, all of that, made it so much easier because there are a lot of faces and angles and bolts, and I think on a square inch basis, this thing probably has more angles to chip and weather and all of that, more faces than any model I've built in recent memory. So it gives a lot of opportunity to do that stuff, to do streaking and weathering and staining and all of that stuff. And I really had a good time. You can see here some of the streaking and staining and rust effects and all the other things that went on with that. So this is it's not a cheap model. I don't remember how much it was. Seems like it was in the $50 to $60 range. I may be wrong about that, but it gave a lot of value for the money because there's plenty to do on it. I mean, this is, if you're looking for a project that will give you plenty of space to weather on so you can kind of practice your techniques, this is it. And it's really cool looking. I really like little point of detail. I really like that stain there. I imagined it being where the track commander spilled his coffee. So that's always kind of fun. I like to put in little details like that. I can definitely recommend this kit for just about any level. If you're a brand new beginner, I don't know that this is a kit that I would say would be a good one to start with. There's some fiddliness with the legs, getting all of these little pistons lined up and getting the legs lined up. But if you've got a few kits under your belt and you're looking for something very different to build that just kind of opens up the possibilities to do whatever you want with it, this would definitely fit the bill. I had even considered trying to do some modifications to turn this into a Star Wars type kit. I could just see this being something out of the Star Wars universe. You replace this with some laser looking cannons and you're pretty much there. So definitely different, definitely fun. One of the questions that came in this month was, should I clear coat my models? And the person who asked the question didn't specify, matte coat, gloss coat. So I guess it was just more of a generic question about clear coats in general. And I have to, as I've done quite often with answering questions, I have to give a politician's answer of it depends, because all a clear coat generally does is prepare the surface for something to come later, or protect the surface for something you've already put on there. So it's not so much that there is a rigid set time that you have to put on a clear coat. I've done quite a few models recently where I don't use any clear coats at all, including for decals. I've put oils and enamels and acrylics and decals and all sorts of things on it, and just let it go without a clear coat. I let the products determine the finish, so that there's parts of it that are gloss, there's parts of it that are satin, there's parts of it that are matte. But there's other times when it is appropriate to put a clear coat on. For example, if you're going to be putting a lot of decals on, I generally recommend that you go with a gloss coat. Or if you're wanting something to not look shiny, then hitting it with a matte coat at the end can help. Sometimes when you're applying oil and enamel washes and other products like that, they go really well over a satin coat. Gives them something to grip onto, but it's not so matte that they just can't be worked with at all. So it really is going to depend on what it is you're trying to accomplish in the overall scheme of the build. Like I said though, not using a matte coat or a clear coat won't be a problem. You just have to kind of plan what it is you want the model to end up looking like, and just think through, if I don't do this clear coat, or if I do this clear coat, what's that going to mean for the final finish? I did a video, and hopefully if I remember, there'll be a link up here or here. Anyway, there'll be a link popping up hopefully about now. It was titled Clear Coating for Gunpla Explained, but it applies basically to any model. So I go into kind of a more in-depth answer there if you want to take a look at that. But the simple answer is you don't have to put on a clear coat. You simply just put it on when it's needed because of something else that's going to be happening in the building and finishing of your model. Another question that came in this month is, what should I use to clean Pledge or Future or Clear from my airbrush? When I clean that out of my airbrush, I generally start with some water. I'll put in a few drops of water, stir it around with a brush, pour that out into a jar, a waste jar. Do that a couple of times before I even blow anything else through the airbrush, just to get out as much as possible simply by pouring it out. Then I'll put in some more water and run that through the airbrush to clean it out a little bit. And then I'll finish up with putting in some rubbing alcohol, 91% isopropyl alcohol, and putting that through there. Alcohol will break down Future, so it cleans it out fairly well. I used to use, many years ago, I used to use Windex because it has ammonia in it, and ammonia will definitely break down Future. But I started noticing that the chrome plating on the inside of my cup started wearing away, the color cup. And I wasn't quite sure for a while why it did that. And someone suggested it may be the ammonia. So I stopped using the ammonia, and I haven't used it on any subsequent airbrushes. And I haven't had any problems with the chrome plating wearing away like I did on that other airbrush. So I wouldn't use any ammonia-based products. Alcohol works well. There have been a few times that to make sure it was really good and clean, that I would use some lacquer thinner, Mr. Color leveling thinner or Mr. Color thinner to run through. But I only do that at the very end because If you put lacquer thinner in and there's a lot of future in there, the future can coagulate, which means it gets clumpy, I think. But anyway, it can create more of a mess than it does help. But water and alcohol are generally what I use to make sure that it's good and cleaned out. And first time you do it, you'll know it if you've done it enough. When you go back and you try and use your airbrush again, if you try and pull the trigger back and that needle is stuck, probably needed some more alcohol. The rubbing kind, I mean. Another question that came in is, what are you building next? And I'll admit this is going to be a shameless plug for Patreon, but Patreon supporters get a twice a month build calendar update. And on that, I detail the projects that I have coming up. And sometimes I'm able to project it out as far as 2, 3, even 4 months. So I talk about not only what I'm working on at the time and what state it's in, but I also talk about the upcoming builds and plans for those and what's going to follow after that. So if you're really interested in that and you'd like to support the work that I do, then click on the Patreon link that's down below in the description and see the various levels that are offered there. For the $5 and $10 levels, I actually do a vlog several times a week, and I just spend about anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes talking about whatever's on my mind, maybe showing some kind of new product I have or a new model, or looking at some modeling nostalgia, or who knows what I'm going to do. But if you want to support the channel, you like the work that I do, I'd be really grateful if you'd take a look at that. Well, for the interview segment this month, I'm going to be talking to Zach Rensberger, who goes by the name ZakuAurelius online. If you're familiar with gunpla, you know who ZakuAurelius is. If you're not, be sure and check out his YouTube channel. It's down in the description below. What Zach does is he reviews gunpla, he builds gunpla, he paints gunpla, he shows tips on how to, everything from filling seams to adding decals, and not only gunpla, but other mecha and anime franchises as well. And he's a prolific videographer. He has, if I remember right, he stopped counting somewhere around 2,000 videos. He used to number them. He's been out there a few years, but it is really helpful stuff. His gunpla reviews are pretty much what I go by if I'm going to be buying a gunpla. I rarely buy anything that I don't see him review, because I've found, at least for me, whatever he says in the review, it fits the things that I like. He seems to have similar expectations of a kit that I do. So when he says, yeah, this is a really great kit, I always know that I'm going to have a good experience. If he says, you got to watch out for this or you got to watch out for that, sure enough, when I build the kit, there it is. So it's not only entertaining to watch, but it's a great help to me to see how he reviews those and what he says about them, and it helps me in my own buying. So he had some time. He lives in Korea, so we had to kind of work to get the schedules meshed up, because, you know, we're doing the interview. It's late evening for him and early morning for me. But thankfully, we were able to get together at a convenient time for both of us and have a good talk. So I hope you'll enjoy this as much as I had fun putting it together. Well, I'm so happy that Zach Rensberger, ZakuAurelius, has been able to join us today for this interview. I'm really looking forward to this, because Zach is one of my favorite YouTube channels, one of my favorite builders. If you know gunpla, you know who he is, you know his channel. If you don't know gunpla, one, you should know gunpla. You need to start building some gunpla. And two, you need to check out his channel, because it is an absolute invaluable resource for gunpla builders. Zach, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, you're welcome, John. Thank you for the intro. That's very kind of you. Appreciate
I
that.
a word of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get right into the questions. First, just give me kind of what's the elevator speech on who you are and what you do. I know I've said a little bit about it, but what do you say? Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from the US. I came here to Korea in 2010. So been here a decade now. And somewhere in between there, I also spent a little time in Japan. And while I was there, you know, I've been into gunpla for a long time. And I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit more later too. So we'll get back to that. But I just basically, in summary, I took that time in Japan to kind of, while I've got everything at my fingertips, I decided to get more into gunpla, and then came back here to Korea and thought making YouTube videos would be pretty cool as well too. I wanted to get more involved in the community, so I first started like trying to doing some blog posting, but it wasn't all that exciting for me, and I had a background in video editing as well too, so I thought I'll just try making some videos instead.
Yeah.
It's very awkward at first, getting used to being in front of the camera or hearing your voice on camera. But I've just been doing that, and I think maybe slowly but surely getting better at that over the years, and
Yep.
just kind of building up the collection of works and videos and stuff. And I just love what I do. That's all about all I can say about that.
Well, let's dig into some more of that. Let's dig a little deeper in that. Do you remember what your first model kit, what did you recall building? Was it gunpla?
Yeah, no, not really actually, but it kind of depends. Yeah, the first model kit that like I really built by myself, I think probably was a Gundam kit. Yeah, but or no, I see, because like when I was really young, before I got into Gunpla, I did have like a couple models. I had a couple of Jurassic Park models, a Tyrannosaurus, and I think the other one was a Dilophosaurus. But as far as I can remember, I think my dad did most of the work on that because I was quite young. So I think I maybe helped with like maybe gluing some of the parts, and then like he painted it and everything. Those are just dinosaurs for me. And then I built I think it was like a stealth bomber or something like that, some model airplane, something like that. Which, I was young, so it just had this really cool design, this like sleek black design was really cool. And that one again too, I want to say probably I got some help on that, but I mean, it wasn't anything, I didn't paint it or anything. It was just I maybe used some glue as far as I needed to just to get everything glued together. But that was, not really much of a thing for me because I was still quite young. So it wasn't really something I could play with. So I was just kind of still playing with toys and stuff at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy it that much until I started building Gunpla. Yeah. And I did start with the HG 100 scale Shenlong Gundam. As far as I can remember, I think that's right. Yeah. That's what I usually tell people when I get asked. So that's what I'll go with.
That's the standard memory you have, right?
Yeah, as far as I can remember. So I'll just stick with that.
All right, that sounds good. Well, how many Gunpla kits have you built, whether it's snapped up or painted? How many have you built?
It's got to be hundreds. I don't know. I've thought about trying to count at some point, but I just feel like, number one, I could find a much better use of my time than trying to count how many kits I've built. And I'm very conscious about my time use. And I mean, that's one thing that a lot of people I know, like especially other content creators, will praise me for, is the amount of videos and things that I put out. And it's something, I guess. But yeah, I'm very conscious about my use of time. So I probably wouldn't ever want to actually spend the time doing that. And I think if I did actually count how many kits I've built in my life, it would probably be, I'd feel like kind of sad. Like, man, that's a lot. It's way too many. But it's definitely hundreds. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess while we have fun doing it, and there is good reason for doing it, sometimes when we look at the amount of time we spend at it, we kind of shake our head and go, was that the best? Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you grew up in the U.S. and of course you're living in Korea now. Give us just a little more detail on how you ended up there, because I doubt that you went to Korea through Japan just for building Gunpla, right?
Yeah, certainly not. But just to kind of go a little bit back before that in the timeline to 2009 was the first time I ever came to this part of the world, when I was still in university. So between my third and fourth year, I came and spent a month in Japan at that time. And so, yeah, I'd been into Gunpla a lot when I was younger, and then just kind of off and on through high school and university. Basically, just was devoting time to other things, and didn't have money to. So it just kind of fell by the wayside. I didn't have any friends that were into it really either. So it wasn't anything that was really much of a hobby for me during that time. But then when I went to Japan, obviously I was then I went to Akihabara and visited, the Mecca of everything. So
yeah,
I picked up a bunch of kits at the time, and like spent a lot of money bringing it all back with me, kind of foolishly. But when you're in that situation, I think a lot of people fall into that trap the first time you go over. It's a
Yeah.
very exciting time. And so I did that, and then that was kind of what got me like kind of really back interested in it again, was having the opportunity to then just like get a bunch more kits when I just didn't really have the time or money for it really before that. And then the next year is when I moved to Korea. So honestly, I didn't really, of course, I didn't come here for gunpla, like you say, but I mean, I even didn't really even think of it that much as like, oh, this will be an advantage of moving to Korea, is that I can also build gunpla, just because I wasn't really sure about how available this stuff would be. I mean, I didn't know if it would be like similar to America, where it's there, but it's not like everywhere. Or how close it would really be to Japan, just because of the physical proximity to Japan doesn't necessarily mean it's as popular. But fortunately, it is still pretty popular. You can buy it like at the supermarkets and stuff. I mean, like our kind of version of Walmart and Target, those kind of stores, they sell some. So that's where I was buying kits for like the first year or so while I was here. But then I learned that they were overpriced there, so I started getting them other places. But really what brought me here was more so just that I wanted to experience living here. Well, I think when I was probably early teenager, probably around the beginning of high school, I guess, I'd heard about people doing ESL, teaching English here in Korea and Japan, actually Japan, basically. And it was right around the same time too, where I was getting a lot more interested in Japanese culture stuff too, seeing like Gundam and different anime shows. I never really watched a ton of anime really though, to be honest, but just a few things, and especially Japanese film as well too. So it was like a good time that I was getting really interested in the culture, and I heard about these opportunities. So I thought, oh, I want to try that, to go to Japan after graduating college and try just being English teacher, living in the culture, just experience that. Actually, before I ever even decided what I wanted to major in college, I knew what I wanted to do after college was go to Japan. But once I graduated, I wasn't able to go to Japan straight away. It's a lot more expensive if you don't get in. There's only like a couple of different jobs that you can get teaching English where they'll actually pay for your travel and everything. And I wasn't able to get that one, despite being overly qualified, in my opinion. It didn't work out, unfortunately. So I thought, well, I'll just go for the next best thing. In my research about that, I found we can also do it in Korea right next door. So I thought I'll go to Korea for a year or two, then go to Japan after that. So that's what I did. But I ended up only staying in Japan for a year doing that. And I came back to Korea mostly just to marry my wife. That was kind of the main reason for coming back.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So Japan's right there. Obviously, since then, I've been to Japan, not in 2020, unfortunately, but basically every year I still go over there. So it's right next door. Yeah. And I just want to also take this time maybe to let people know just about, because this is actually something I don't really talk about that much, in my live streams and stuff. I answer a lot of questions, and a lot of people don't really ask that much about, like, in my experience living in Japan, strangely enough. And even though I'm sure there's a lot of people who are interested in that, just because it's a very Japanese centric hobby that we're talking about. But I mean, living there it's a hard place to live. It's not this like perfect heaven on earth that I think a lot of people in kind of our community believe it to be. So I enjoyed living there, certainly, but I'm not depressed about not living there anymore. Living here is very comfortable and good too. So
well, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. I looked back on your channel, April 16th, 2014. You posted video number 001.
Yeah.
At that time, where were you hoping things would go? What was, when you were recording that, what was in your mind about where's this going to go?
Well, yeah, it tells you, at least there's one thing that you can learn from that, is that that I don't really have a very good sense of humor as an internet kind of person on the internet. I have a very dry sense of humor. Obviously, if I was more sensible, I would have waited till April 20th to post my first video. That would have been funnier, right? In hindsight. But what I was thinking then, is that, and I talked about it in that video. Basically, I explained kind of why I wanted to start off my channel. I had some like third-party kits from other companies where they're like intellectual property bootleg kits, but not like straight Bandai copies, those kind of kits. and some P Bandai kits. That was right at the kind of the start of P Bandai as well too. This one was just
Mhm.
kind of started. So these kind of harder to find kits or more exclusive kits, or not like your kind of everyday kits. I was seeing not getting a ton of coverage on YouTube, and there wasn't a lot of gunpla channels in general at that time, but there was like a
Yeah.
few big ones that were really kind of covering everything. So I thought that would be kind of a good niche for me, basically, to just take a look at some of these kits that were not getting as much coverage, and then also just kind of cover the things that I was building, working on as well too.
Mhm.
So you see, like in my first couple of videos, is just basically reviews of those kind of kits, exclusive kits, and then
Yeah.
also like work in progress and like delivery videos and stuff, like just showing new stuff I got in the mail, that kind of thing, kind of standard stuff. You know, I at least at the start, and even still today, I mean, too, because it's still kind of the main thing on my channel. But you know, nothing that I was really doing at that time or even now is that groundbreaking. It's all just kind of standing on the shoulders of what other channels were already doing before that, but just trying to
Yeah.
do it in a little bit different or
Yeah.
better in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for quite a while, you were working a day job, doing all
Mm.
these videos almost as a side gig. Were there times that you sat back and thought, what am I doing? Because I kind of do the same thing.
Mm.
I do a video a week. I have a day job. You know,
Mm.
it's constant nose to the grindstone.
Mhm.
Did you kind of second guess it a little along the way?
Yeah. I get you. Yes. Well, for one, I was quite fortunate that my day job did give me a good amount of downtime.
Mm,
Being a teacher, uh, and especially being a teacher for a number of years, after you know you're doing the same job for a number of years, you kind of accumulate everything that you need to go through every day without really
yeah.
spending a much of your day preparing. You've got it already prepared, basically. So like
Hmm.
being a teacher, I already had all the materials I need, so I hardly needed very much time at all to prepare for my classes every day. So
Yeah.
I teach, you know, I work 8 hours a day, and probably about half of that is spent teaching. So I'd have at least 3 hours probably in an afternoon time to work on stuff. So that was a good amount of time for me to, that's when I'm
Hmm.
usually like snapping up kits for reviews or editing reviews and things like that, things that I can do easily there at my office at my school, I was able to do. So that was good. I could do that and then just work on basically recording stuff at home.
Hmm.
Basically is kind of the main thing. And then like painting and all that. Of course, I can't do it at my school.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, of course, it is a big time draw, and I think there were some growing pains, surely, especially
Mhm.
during that first time, because that was right around like right before getting married and right at the start of getting married. I got married in 2015, and as you said, my channel started in 2014, so it was right in those first couple of years. My channel was around that time of getting married, so. Uh, there were times when I had to kind of get checked by my wife a little bit, like she got mad about the amount of time that I was spending. And I think probably a lot of people, whether you have a YouTube channel or not, people who just have hobbies that they're, you know, very interested and devoted to, and also have relationships, and especially
Yeah.
once you have children and stuff too, you can get in trouble. But fortunately, I think in my case, I went through all that before we had kids. So
Yeah.
once the kids came along, I was a little bit better at devoting my time, you know, to
Hmm.
separating my family time and hobby time. So even now to this day, like basically, if there's any time that I could be with my family, then I'm with them. Uh,
That's a good thing.
so like the only time I work is during the day when my wife is also working and my kids are at their daycare, preschool and
Hmm.
stuff, or at night when they're sleeping,
Yeah.
and then I'm working. So yeah, I don't take away family time to do work, hardly ever. You know, unless it's like I want to do a day-long live stream, then then my wife is stuck with both the kids all day long, and I feel a little bit bad about that. But normally,
Yeah.
I'm always there with them. Yeah,
Yeah, and I encourage you in that, and anybody in
mm,
the hobby, because
yeah,
20 years down the road, you're not going to look back and go, "Man, I didn't get enough modeling time."
yeah.
Um,
Well,
but no matter how much time we spend with the kids, you
yeah.
know, we will look back. I know I do with my kids; they're
Mm,
growing up now.
mm,
That I look back, and even with all the time I spent, I
mm.
think, man, I wish I would have spent more. So I
Yep.
commend you for that. That's an awesome thing.
No, yeah. I mean, my son is 5, my daughter is 3, but I already feel that. Yeah, looking at pictures of them, just even like 1, 2, 3 years ago,
Yeah,
thinking like, man, I wish I
yeah,
would have spent more time with them. But
yeah.
I do.
Wait
I try
until
not to make it hard on myself.
in their 30s and they're
Yeah.
sending you pictures of their kids, and it really brings it home. Well,
Mhm.
you've already talked about, you know, how you've kind of arranged things around the
Mhm.
building and the production of videos and how you did your schedule then.
Mhm.
Were there any particular things, like any time hacks that you came
Mhm.
up with? You know, any things that you did that you thought, hey, this is really saving me a lot of time, or you know, anything
Mhm.
like that?
The main thing is just don't sleep. That's kind of that's my probably the main tactic that I use for getting stuff as much as I do done. You know, I try to do this every day, but certainly more often than not, I probably go to bed around 3.
Wow.
So
Wow.
uh, and it depends. Sometimes, you know, I'll go through stints where maybe it's a little bit earlier, 1 or 2, but it's usually at least around 2 average. And recently it's been later, around 3. So
Wow.
that's the thing. And like I know like you and like Lincoln, for example, are the kind of people who wake up really early in the morning. I couldn't
Yeah.
do that. I wish I could do both. Ideally, if I could just not sleep. Like sleeping
Yeah.
like 2 hours would be good for me. If I could
Yeah.
work late
Yeah.
into the night and wake up really early, I'd be golden.
Yeah, yeah, I'm an early riser. I get up at 4:30 every morning, 7 days a
Yeah.
week, 365 days a year, but by 9 o'clock, I'm asleep. I can't
Yeah.
stay up late. So yeah, well, I know what
Yeah.
you mean about some people are morning people, some people are
Mhm.
evening people, but you
So,
do, you work hard. You put out a lot of videos. You stopped numbering your videos after what,
yeah.
2000?
2000, yeah.
2000 is as in the not year, but the number of videos,
Yeah.
and you put out a ton since then. So
Mhm. I recently just passed 2,500.
wow.
I've still
Okay,
got them counted here, like, in my files and stuff, I just
yeah.
don't put in the title.
I
Mhm.
was just gonna say, you're like a duck, you know, you watch a duck, and on the
Mhm.
surface, he looks calm and serene, but underneath, he's paddling like crazy, man.
Oh, yeah.
So
Mhm.
you're constantly at it. Well, that's cool. Now,
Yeah.
at some point, you were able to make the decision to become a full-time creator,
Mhm.
to stop your day job,
Mhm.
do creation full-time.
Mhm.
Was that kind of a scary decision to make? Was that, you know,
Uh,
was that hard to kind of say, "Okay,
mm,
I'm ready to do this. I'm gonna commit to this"?
yeah, uh, sort of, but no. I think because, if it was, like, exactly how you're phrasing it, then maybe yes, but I would phrase it more so in that I was given the opportunity to do what I do, not that
Mm,
I made the choice or, I mean, it was my choice, but uh, working for Adam, working for USA Gundam Store, if I
yeah,
was only doing this, only relying on YouTube, then yeah, it would have been, you know, a much different story. It would have been much more scary. I wouldn't have done it unless, you know, I underwent a lot more growth than what I'm at now. Because what I'm at now, it's not enough. If I was unmarried, just by myself, maybe,
yeah,
but especially with a family, it's just not enough. But because I have the financial stability of basically just being an employee of USA Gundam Store,
yeah,
again, thanks to Adam, that made it a lot less scary, really, to be honest. So it was fine. Basically, I didn't have to take any pay cut from basically what I was making as a teacher, so that's good. Um, I mean, there's details about that I don't know.
sure, sure.
Just the rest of the details about it, maybe I don't need to get into. But to answer
Yeah,
your question, no, it wasn't really that scary. It was something I was already doing. I mean, I was already spending hours every day doing this YouTube already, so it wasn't that big of a change, really, to be honest.
yeah. Well, that's cool. And the fact that Adam made that available for you, and
Mhm.
for viewers, if Adam is the owner of USA Gundam Store, and I'd actually interviewed him for the last Tuesday show back in November.
Mhm.
So when you're done watching this one, if you want to go see the interview with
Yeah.
Adam, you can take a look at that.
Yes. It was
But
a good one.
that's thank you. That's yeah, I loved talking to him. I
Mhm.
absolutely we had the best time. That whole thing about him selling gunpla out of a white van, you know, and the police,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah,
wondering
yeah.
what the heck is this guy selling? All these young kids are coming up with cash and they're taking
Yeah.
boxes away.
Yeah, that
I
was funny. I
laughed
had
so
never
hard
heard
at
that
that.
story before, so that was good, yeah.
Yeah, I laughed so hard at that.
Mm.
Well, okay, so you know, you had the opportunity to do this full time. You didn't have to go to your day job when you had that first day of doing it, that first day, I guess you would say, of freedom. Um, you know,
Yeah.
what was that like? Did you kind of sit down in your bathrobe with a cup of coffee and you go, "Man, I got all the time in the world. Now what am I going to do with it?" How did that go?
Yeah, oh, man. I mean, 'cause I mean, it wasn't that sudden. So I mean, I had a lot of time to think about it and plan out basically what I was gonna do. And uh, so I mean, I thought about it a lot. So it wasn't necessarily the case. But I mean, and especially I was working at home at that time. Now my office here is separate from my home. It's across the street. So it's not that far.
Yeah.
But I was working at home at the time. So I mean, there not really was much of that, really, to be honest, because I mean, like you said, because I do work pretty hard, and I don't think that's the right word for it. I mean, that's sort of like technically true, but I don't feel like that at all. I don't feel like, "Oh, I'm working hard. I just, like I said before, I really love what I do.
Yeah.
So I just am super excited all the time to be building stuff. So I mean, like just having all day to do that is just, I mean, like there's not enough hours in the day. No matter how
Yeah.
much free time I had for it, it wouldn't be enough.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, I mean, like I think straight up out the gate, I mean, I was just grinding away. That's just
Cool.
what I like
That's
doing. So
cool.
yeah.
Well, tell us what does a typical day look like for you now? You know, what you get up, you're ready to get started. What does that typically look like?
Well, family time in the morning, of course, just getting
Mhm.
the kids all ready and breakfast and off to their preschool and daycare. And then coming in here, and it really just kind of depends day to day. I probably should put a little bit more structure to it, but I think just because of the way of how I go about my process of some
Mhm.
days I'll be working on like building a kit for a review. Some days I'll be working on painting like a personal project. Um, that kind of stuff I still cover on the channel as well too. Or some days I need to work on editing. Some days I need to work on recording. It's like yesterday, for example, I spent like almost all day like recording a bunch of videos, and then today I spent almost all day editing a bunch of videos.
Mhm.
But it's not necessarily the case that I'll spend an entire day doing one thing as well too. I'll maybe separate it out. So it's really just kind of depends. But and it sounds kind of messy, and I think I probably would be better suited by giving myself a little bit more of a like actual schedule.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, I think it's also good for me too because it keeps me from getting burnt out. That's one
Yeah.
thing I get asked about a lot is how do
Yeah.
I not get burnt out? And I don't know. I think I just like I said I love it so much. But the other reason as well too is that because I'm free to bounce around between different
Mhm.
aspects of what I do. Uh, that freedom I think keeps me from getting burnt out because maybe one day, I know I need to record a video, I need to record a review for this kit, but if I'm really not feeling like I would want to do that day, there's a lot of other things that I can do. I can just build another kit or do something else, and so
Yeah.
that's helpful for me. There's a lot of things to keep me busy, uh, and I just don't ever feel like burnt out, which is good. So
Yeah, that is good. And I'm guessing, like I know in my own videos, I try to stay about 5 to 6 weeks ahead of the schedule.
yeah,
So
yeah, you're
there's
crazy.
flexibility. So I'm guessing you probably do something similar, that you're always a little bit ahead
Uh,
or
mm,
not.
yeah, a little bit. It
A
kind of
little bit.
depends. Never that far ahead, really. Yeah, not really. But maybe like I'll have a good idea of basically what I want to do for that week,
Mm,
kind of, and then it's usually what will usually happen is I'll have maybe an idea of what I kind of want to accomplish throughout the week.
yeah.
And then by the end of the week, there'll be, a handful of things that I didn't get to that will then roll over into the next week.
Yeah.
And then I kind of work those into what I'm going to do. So basically, every week's plan consists of like stuff that didn't get done the last week, and then stuff that I know that certainly needs to get done this week. And then kind of whatever else I have time for, I'll try to fit it in between there as well, too. So
Yeah.
I find I'm just not really good sometimes about imagining how much time things are going to take. Stuff
Yeah.
always takes longer than I think it's going to, or
Yeah.
sometimes vice versa, but usually not.
Yeah, I've run into that where I'll think, okay, I'm gonna do this part of this build in one episode, and I get a third of the way through it, and I'm like, I'm already running up on what I want to be my time limit, and I'm not even yeah, yeah. It can be hard sometimes because you get involved in things.
Hmm.
Well, one of the things I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit is I've always found your reviews very helpful. I only came into Gunpla about 3-4 years ago. I'd been building aircraft before that, and pretty quickly when I went to YouTube and I typed in Gundam reviews,
Hmm.
there you were.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I started watching your channel, and I found it really helpful because I've found that generally we must have very similar tastes,
Yeah.
because when you say, I really like this went together well, then I have the same experience. If you say, here's some problems I ran into, or I don't really like this, or I think it looks weird this way, I've just found your reviews incredibly helpful. In fact,
Yeah.
generally I don't buy something if you don't give it a good review, because the few times I've departed from that, I'd build a kit and I'd get through it and I go, yep, he was right. He was right. And because I'm much more about fun than I am necessarily the design. So consistency in that must be really important for you. I mean, you must be very aware of it because you do such a good job of being consistent.
I mean, honestly, John, I'm a pretty simple guy. Maybe that's what we have in common. I think we're just kind of just regular guys, who just enjoy building models. That's kind of really it. I honestly don't think about that much, and that's kind of the thing that, honestly, I think if I did put more thought into my videos, probably I would see some more success. But honestly, yeah, I just kind of wing it and just give. Here's what it is. Here's what it is. Here's what I think about it. Because I think yeah, I mean, just in my opinion, as a reviewer, that's kind of what all I can do, really. I mean, that's the point, is to show it. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it can do, like all the objective things. And then I put in a little bit of my opinion in as well, too, thoughts and just kind of predictions, things like that as well, too. Just being someone who has a lot of experience with these things, I think probably my thoughts on the model is also probably valuable to some people as well, too, like you say. But, I can't be too subjective with it as well at the same time. And I think I wouldn't be. I'm just not that kind of person as well, too. I think I would describe my personality, probably, if you were to describe it in a negative way, it's probably a little bit wishy-washy. I don't see it that way. But that may just be because I just don't want to see it that way. But I am very opinionated about some things, but when it comes to models, I'm not really, because it's such a subjective thing, and it's just a very fun hobby. Like, how could you be? I don't really understand how anyone could be that opinionated about kits when I see people getting worked up one way or the other. And that's kind of to my detriment as well, too, because people say, I've heard that I'm just kind of monotone, a little bit dull in my talking about kits. I'm like, yeah, I really like this kit, but I'm not super over the top excited. I mean, it's a kit I enjoy or something. I don't get that animated about, kits. I don't know. I'm just not that kind of person, unfortunately.
Yeah. And on that aspect of it, honestly, I actually like that, because I know there've been a few times as I've been trying to grow my channel and trying to find my way as a YouTuber, that I've done a couple of takes of videos where I would go, okay, I'm going to try and be really enthusiastic about it. And I'm going to be Radio Voice John. And I'm going to be really enthusiastic. And I get 2 minutes into it, and I just go, this ain't me. All I can do, I'm a goofy old balding guy who, falls asleep early and yells at squirrels in the yard. I mean, I can only be myself. And I think that's one of the things I appreciate about what you bring to it, is you just go, you're not that. You seem to me, from the outside looking in, you don't seem like you're real impressed with yourself. And you're just a humble guy who says, here's what I know, here's what I do, and here's what I think of it. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, totally. You mean you do have to be yourself. I think I've heard that from a number of different people who, like other people, musicians and content creators and things, that's kind of what a lot of people who I would trust their opinions would say on that, is that, if you're a person who has fans, with a minute, when you're not being yourself, your fans will know. People will know when you're not being yourself. So, I mean, yeah, it's just the kind of thing. I don't think about this really. When I'm going, I don't think okay, I just have to be myself, right? That's just not a part of it. I just do it, right, and just am myself. But yeah, I think that's something that, I mean, that I do. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say take pride in my content, but something that I think that I'm glad when people appreciate about my content. The fact that it's just a very kind of relaxed tone, a chill tone, like I have described it as basically, I want it to feel like you're just hanging out with your friend talking
Yes.
about a model. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's, like it's not what I'm aiming for, but I think if that's how it's coming out, then that's good. So if people are receiving it that way, then I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Because there are times when I'm working on a kit that I'll have one of your videos up and I'll just have my phone there. I won't even really be looking at it.
Yeah.
And I'll just be listening. And there's almost times that I want to respond. I mean, just talk to the phone, because it does really just seem like a conversation like we're having here. So that's really cool. Well, my next question was going to be, do you have an off-camera checklist you go by, or have you been doing it so long that you just follow an internal dialogue? I'm guessing you're just more of, you've done it, you know what you're doing, you just talk about it. You don't look at a checklist and go, okay, talk about arm articulation or something like that.
Yes, right. You're right. It's a number of things. Yes, I've been doing it so long, I just kind of know my way around what I need to do.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I try not to get too stuck with that. I mean, like from time to time, I do try to change it a little bit because I don't want to look back at my videos, and I never look back at my old videos anyway, so I guess it wouldn't matter. But I wouldn't want to be in the situation where I could look back on a video from 2 or 3 years ago and not have it be distinguishable at all from what I'm doing now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm always looking to improve it or change what I'm doing in a way that's, I think better, equally like comfortable for me and everything. But
Yeah.
no, I think that's kind of basically it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when you're just being yourself, you don't have to remember something else. It's a different area. But when I was a kid, when I was young, preteen, my mom told me, she goes, you understand, if you don't ever lie, you don't have to remember the lies you told. If you just tell the truth.
Nice.
Now I kind of abused that. She would say, did you clean your room? And I go, nope, didn't clean my room.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're just being yourself, you don't have to think, oh yeah, I've got to affect this certain persona. It's just me, take it or leave it.
I mean, it's a similar kind of thing like we were talking about before about my schedule, though, too. I think probably I would be well suited if I were to actually work off a script or at least some bullet points. It would probably help keep me on track, not to get off on tangents, things like that, or repeat myself. These are the kind of things I've just tried to work on over the years. I've heard people complaining about them, saying that I'm just too long-winded and repeat myself a lot. So like these kind of things I tried to work on. I think I've been getting a little bit better at that more recently. But but it is, I think it would help keep me on track, but at the same time it just wouldn't be as comfortable for me. I've tried it a couple times years ago to like actually have like some sort of a script or kind of like an outline of what I wanted to say, and it's just like it's not comfortable for me.
Yeah.
So I mean, it works for some people, I think, very well, other YouTubers, and it's just not for me. So
yeah, and I understand that because I'm kind of the same way. That what I depend on is my enthusiasm about the subject to carry me through the day.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've had to get brutal at my edits to try and get my video links down because you're right, it can get long, but when you're excited about what you're doing, you just want to share that. So, and I love the way that comes through with nobody could accuse you of not really being into what you're doing. It's obvious you love it.
Yeah.
Well, you've built a lot of models. What are some of the areas that you feel you're strong at in terms of whether the full process? What are some areas that you feel like you're really strong at, and what are some areas that you feel like you've identified, hey, I want to grow in this area? That's something I've never done that I want to challenge myself to do.
Sure. Well, I would say probably I'm pretty good at just doing like very clean builds.
You're more than pretty good
I really
at it.
thought of that as being like a point of pride necessarily, because I always thought of it as like clean builds is like the basic step, and then weathering is the actual advanced building. So I've always felt a little bit like I'm just kind of comfortably stuck at like the intermediate stage of doing clean builds. But then in more recent years, I have heard from people like you and people like Link and other much more very experienced modelers who I respect quite a lot, telling me, no, clean builds are actually can be just as equally challenging. So I guess that's a good thing that I'm good at, I suppose. And I think a lot of that just comes from just patience, basically. I'm very careful with my building, so I guess that's what makes me good at that. But so on the flip side, the thing that I would say I would need to work on a lot more and would like to work on a lot more is weathering. But it's just kind of a challenge for me. Number one, just because it's just very uncomfortable for me. I don't know. Whenever I try it, I just feel like I just am never liking how it looks. I mean, sometimes at the end of the build, I think like the little bit of weathering that I've done ends up looking okay. But I don't know. I've just never really been that comfortable with it every time when I've tried. But it is something that I would like to do more. At the same time, as far as just like the aesthetic that I like in models, like the models that I see and the models that I like, that I want to make, it's not really something that I prefer. I kind of much prefer. I mean, I can see there's a lot of really amazing weathered builds and stuff like that, especially when you get into stuff outside of gunpla. I mean, weathered gunpla is cool too, but I mean, like weathered other sci-fi kits and other mecha models and Maschinen Krieger and things like that. Kind of more often than not look much better weathered. But I mean, I can see a lot of things that I like either way, but definitely my preference is I just love to see some really nice clean builds as well too. So it's kind of like it's hard to really push myself to get better and practice more weathering when it's not necessarily really something that I prefer anyway. It's just something I feel like is something I should have better skills at within my skill set. So kind of every now and then I try to work on that a little bit, but I certainly am not focused on that as much as I could or should be.
And I understand that because like recently I've been wanting to get better at mini painting, figure painting, Warhammer kind of figures and things like that. But it's its own discipline that you really have to spend time focused on that to improve. And when you're trying to get content out and do the thing that you really love, it can be kind of hard. And I will say about your clean builds, I really love your builds. I mean, they are so sharp, so clean. And one of the things that I really like about just every build I've seen you do is your color choices.
Nice.
Because I mean, if I'm picking colors, I'm kind of like, I don't know, pick some whites, some reds, some black. I can try and come up with a custom color scheme, and I get done, and I go, I just don't like it. But it is so hard for me not to rip off your color schemes every time because I see them and I go, my gosh, they just work. So I love your color schemes.
Well, thank you. I think among the Gunpla guys, they gave me the nickname of Color Boy. So I'm always the one that's talking about colors and like nitpicking about colors and stuff. So yeah, it's something I love, doing that, getting the colors just right on kits and things like that. So yeah, that's something that I really enjoy about my builds as well. Definitely.
And it shows. It shows. Now, you don't just focus on Gunpla, of course, with regards to non-Gunpla kits. You've done many of those that aren't Gunpla. What has been what do you like? What's been interesting and exciting in other properties and anime and franchises and things like that?
Sure. Basically, really kind of anything. And that's the great thing about building non-Gunpla stuff is because most of what I build is Gunpla. So anything, I mean, anytime I'm building something other than Gunpla, it's just a nice break. It's not like I'm feeling tired of building Gunpla, but it's just cool to build something else every now and then, right? So, I try to, probably the most fun thing to build other than Gunpla for me would probably be like the Mecha Musume kits, the Frame Arms Girl and Megami Device kits. Sorry to say for the people who are not really into those kits. I'm pretty sure I've never seen you build one of those, John. So I'm going to say that they're not really too much interest to you either.
Yeah, well, it's not that I can't appreciate them. It's like you were talking about with weathering. I look at them and I go, that's just not really me, But I when you do a video, I watch them because I do like seeing that content. But yeah, you're right. And I get what you're saying. That's kind of thing is not necessarily me.
Yeah, and I mean, and I know for my audience too, it's not people's, top thing that they want to see either, but they are really fun to build, I'll tell you. And I would recommend everyone, you included, to build one at some point. I don't know, they're just fun to build. They're very
Yeah.
different. And so it's cool building like an actual kind of little figure, and then you have all the stuff that you're adding onto it, and they're very customizable and everything. So
Mhm.
they're a lot of fun to build, and you don't have a lot of problems like frame arms. The actual mecha kits as well too are cool in their designs, but they have a lot more. I don't know, they're a bit more finicky,
Yeah.
unfortunately, to work with. So they're not quite as fun. They're very
Mhm.
cool looking and everything, but as far as like what's something that looks cool and is really fun to play around with, those kits are really cool.
Yeah.
But, I love Machine and Krieger stuff as well too. I don't build that as much as I would like to, but that just goes mostly back to what you mentioned about just time constraints.
Yeah.
Everything that I'm trying to do day to day. I can't do everything that I would like, but I
Yeah.
would love to work on more Machine and Krieger stuff than what I
Yeah.
do. I just finished the Cooster the other day, so I'm happy about
Yeah.
that.
That Cooster, that is an inspired design there. I would,
Yeah, thank you.
if you haven't seen it, go visit Zach's channel
Mhm.
after this interview, and take a look at it, because you put some arms on it. It's holding an airbrush. I mean, you gave it an entirely different look.
Mhm.
And not only does it have such a cool look, but again, those colors on it. It's such a
Mhm.
simple color scheme, but man, it's just amazing. That was a really nice looking result.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I was happy with how it came out. Man, I was really worried about the colors for a minute there because they were really bright on that,
Mhm.
and it just they looked really kind of out of place. But once I got a little wash on there, it did kind of all come together. So you just
Yeah,
have to have faith in your color choices
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, a lot of things. The other kit that I'm currently working on painting is a Pokemon kit as well too. So I mean,
Mhm.
I work on all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah,
uh, I mean, just kind of anything that is something. If it's something that I enjoy, like design wise, then I enjoy working on it as a model kit. So
yeah. And I will say, you've inspired me to build some things that I would not have considered otherwise, like the Macatro Wego
yeah,
kit.
yeah.
I had seen that before, and I thought, okay, that looks cool, but I'm like, that's just not something I'd build. I watched your review of it and talking about it,
Hmm.
and honestly, your enthusiasm for it infected
Hmm.
me. And I said, okay, I'm going to build this, and I had a blast with that kit. Same
Yeah.
thing with the little obsolete kit.
Uh-huh.
You did a review of it, and I had seen it, and I thought, that's a tiny little kit. I'm thinking, you did a review of it, and I got the itch. And not only did I have a lot of fun with it, but from a creator standpoint, that video's done better than any of my other videos in the
Oh
last
yeah.
2 or 3 months. So
Yeah.
you have inspired me with some things that you've said, hey, I think this is pretty cool, and I go, I'll give it a
Yeah.
try, and it's
That's
it's been spot on every time.
Yeah, that's cool. That's the other thing that I do like about that. I mean, it's not only good for me that I like building other stuff as well too, but I do like to hear that. It's cool to hear that from people who, sometimes I'll build some other kit that's a kind of more obscure thing that people just didn't even know existed, and so
Mhm.
they're like turned on to other stuff as well too. So I think that's good for other people as well too, to build more than just gunpla. So if I can help to turn people on to other stuff as well too, that's also cool. I
Yeah,
think I
yeah.
enjoy
Well, that's cool. That's cool. All right, we're going to get to what I call the lightning round. I'm going to hit you with some questions,
that.
and you can be one word answers. You can go into a great details, whatever you want to answer. So,
Okay.
first question: Gaia or Mr. Color?
Ooh. Uh, if it's the lightning round, I will say Mr. Color. Mr. Color is what I use more often than Gaia, but I do love Gaia paints as well too. They have
Yeah,
some really beautiful colors,
yeah,
uh, but in a pinch, Mr. Color has just got those solid colors that like you're really
yeah.
familiar with, will work. So, uh, I try to mix it up, but more often than not, Mr. Color,
All right, master grade or real grade?
master grade. Yeah.
Okay, IBO or unicorn?
Definitely Unicorn. It's one of my
Really?
favorite Gundam series. Yeah.
Yeah.
IBO, I really enjoyed the first couple episodes. I thought it had a lot of potential, but then it just got a little bit too predictable. Or not. I don't know. The writing just kind of fell apart for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That was actually the first Gundam anime that I watched, and
Mhm.
when I got into it, so it's always had a special place for me, just because it's the first one I remember, but
Oh yeah,
I like both of
yeah.
them. I like both of them.
It
All
was
right.
cool. It was fun. Yeah.
Cheeseburgers or pizza?
Pizza, but that's a tough one. I mean, I could go for either of them at pretty much any time, but if I had to choose one, probably pizza.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when in doubt, eat both.
Cheeseburger pizza, that exists
Yeah.
too.
I've had that and it's good.
Yeah.
Hip hop or metal?
Oh, that's another tough one because that's my bread and butter, both of them.
Yeah. I've seen you put
So
up videos of what you're listening
Mhm.
to. And that's why I asked, because you put up both. And
Yeah.
so I thought, well, I'll nail you down on one.
I don't know, man. Uh, Hip hop is so much more fun.
Mhm.
But metal, I think, gives me a lot more, I don't know, just kind of substance.
Mhm.
So it kind of depends, whatever I listen to, it depends on what I'm in the mood for. But, if I had to pick one, I guess I'd probably stick with metal. I'd probably stick with, that's what, has really been kind of the main thing for me. Hip hop is just something that I've also enjoyed. But,
Yeah.
it's always kind of been metal. So I guess I'll stick with that.
All right. Airbrush or brush paint?
Certainly airbrush. Although I've recently been trying to do some more hand brushing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a lot more time consuming than you think. You
It
think,
really
oh, I
is.
can just whip out the paint and just get it on there, but no, it takes a while to get it actually right. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I remember the first time I tried to do a Lincoln Wright,
hmm
brush paint with lacquers.
yep,
He makes it look so fast. And,
yeah,
it's like 4 days later, I'm still working on the leg of a machining career kit. And I'm like, oh, this takes a lot longer than I thought it did. Yeah. So I know what
yeah,
you're talking about there.
yep, exactly.
All right. Snap it up or paint it?
Uh, I'd paint everything if I could, if I had the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, but then again, just snap building kits is something that's really therapeutic for me. I
Yeah.
think, uh,
Yeah.
man, I need that sometimes. Snapping kits. So, like I was talking about before, how I kind of bounce around between doing a lot of different things. Sometimes I just really need like a couple days worth of like just snapping kits. It's great to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I can definitely relate to that. There's times where work has been rough or there's issues going on that are just tough to deal with. And I don't want to work on what I'm supposed to be working on.
yeah,
And sometimes I'll just pull a gunpla kit out, an HG kit, and I just sit there and I don't put a whole lot of thought into it. I'll
yep.
put something on YouTube, start snapping it up,
hmm
and I get done and I move it around and I make pew pew noises and just kind of enjoy that process. So yeah, I can totally relate to that. All
Definitely.
right, final question in the lightning round.
Yep.
Star Wars, originals, prequels, or sequels?
Originals, prequels, or sequels, the three options.
Yeah,
Oh, well, then of course, originals.
there you
I
go.
thought you were going to ask me just the prequels or sequels. That would have been a little bit tougher. But I mean, if the
Okay,
original,
well then, so you
yeah,
said originals number one, prequels or
yeah.
sequels after that.
That's where it gets tougher. Because I mean, everybody hates on the prequels, but between I think the sequels are probably better movies. But I mean, I don't hate. What, did I say that wrong? The sequels are probably better
Mhm.
made. I mean, I don't know. That's tough. I
Yeah,
like this. I like the prequels well enough. I mean, for all the hate they
yeah,
get, like, I mean, I can see all the flaws, and they're certainly nowhere near as good as the original. But I like the prequels well enough. I'm
yeah,
not one of those people who just hates them.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
had a friend that he said his attitude was when he watches them, he just doesn't think of them as Star Wars movies, and he's okay with
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. They're just kind of like just cool
Here's,
sci-fi movies. They're just
here's a
not.
cool sci-fi movie. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, totally. Mhm.
Okay, now we've already talked about this a little bit, but dive into it a little deeper. You have a great collaboration with USA Gundam Store and Adam. And how did that get started? Did you approach them? Did they approach you? Was it just kind of a simultaneous explosion?
Yeah, I approached them.
Mhm.
I was working with a sponsor before that, who that was Australian based.
Mhm.
And then they were making some changes to their business. They were getting out of the gunpla business,
Mhm.
so that ended. And then I was looking for another sponsor,
Mhm.
and I knew that from my YouTube analytics, most of my viewers were from the U.S. And
Mhm.
Canada. So I thought, well, if I'm going to be working with another sponsor, I should probably work with a sponsor who deals with the majority of my audience. It'd probably be good.
Yeah.
Uh, and because I don't live in America, I'm not really familiar with a lot of the stores there, so I don't know which ones are there, which ones are good or anything. So I actually just asked around to some friends, and I think I've put up a post on my Facebook page as well too, just asking people like, where do you shop? Where do you recommend? What are some good shops you think? And a lot of people said USA Gundam Store. And they were still, I mean, relatively new at that time. The store had only been around for a few years. So yeah, it was recommended a lot. And a lot of people said they thought it was a good business. I wanted to make sure that I was, reaching out to a business that would be servicing my audience, but also that would be, a good business to collaborate with, that had a good reputation too, right? And the USA Gundam Store fits. So I actually reached out to Adam, and I think I probably mentioned about that. Like, hey, I was working with this other sponsor and it's fallen through. I'm looking for another sponsor. And basically everything that I just said, I explained to him, and he was all for it. Yeah. So he said, yeah. Cool. And how did it work at the beginning? I think at the beginning, basically, it was just kind of like whatever new kits were coming out, I just picked them up here. Because I'm in Korea, it doesn't really make much sense for him to send me the kits directly over here. So it's basically kind of always been the case that I just get what I need here, and then it's basically just reimbursed from Adam at USA Gundam stores. So he just said, just do your thing, and we'll take care of it. So he's been a very cool person to work for. And then now it's been a year and a half, almost not that long, almost a year and a half that I've been working full time for them now. And that was a similar kind of situation. Basically, we had talked about it a little bit already, because I told him how me and my family were planning to move to the States in the future. We were kind of talking about like, oh, when I move there, how about me working there at the store? So we'd already kind of talked about it in that sense. But then I talked to him basically, well, how about me being an employee just from here where I am first before I move? And he was for it. So very lucky of me, I think.
And I've really enjoyed, I especially like when y'all do your live sessions where you're not only talking about, because you do talk about what's coming out, what's going to be in stock, what's going to be at the store. And but you also just talk about gunpla in general. And it's just really informative sometimes to just sit there and listen to it, because the interplay between the two of you is very good. And the things you talk about, the more you listen to that, the more you really start getting really knowledgeable about the hobby in general. So I for one love listening to that. Sometimes it's on most of the time it's on when I'm at work, but if I can, I sneak my headphones on and listen to it, and hope that the tech support phone line doesn't ring. So that's been really cool to see grow.
Yeah, that's those are really fun, and those are on the USA, not on my channel, but on the USA Gundam TV channel. I should note, on a separate channel. But I mean, from the start, when I pitched that idea to Adam to do those videos, was that I just thought it would be a good opportunity for people to get to know him and get to know the business side of it. Just kind of, rather than shopping from a business that they don't know. People, they don't know like what the business is about. It's just a kind of empty place where they get their stuff from. I wanted people to actually have a chance to get actually more familiar with the owner and the business side of everything. So I mean, it was never an idea for it to be about sales, like promoting stuff. So I mean, like, we worked that in there. Just at like the start of the shows, we always start off by Adam will just talk about some stuff that's new in stock. I mean, it's certainly not the focus of those videos, is just to promote stuff for selling, It's just like with pretty much everything I do, I just see it as being a resource for the community.
And it really is, because it one of the things, I grew up going to local hobby shops, and knowing the person that was there and they could answer questions. And as the local hobby shops have gone away, the online stores, even the really good ones, can kind of get a little impersonal because you don't know who's there. So that show really does put a face with it, which people like to feel good about where they're shopping. And I think putting that face with it and people knowing, okay, that's the guy he's at the top of the food chain there. And if I'm not happy, or if I'm happy, he's the guy I can talk to. And I've heard him over and over, and there's a familiarity with him. So that's really cool. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
Well, what would 10-year-old Zach, 12-year-old Zach, you pick an age, what would young Zach think about what you're doing now? If he could come forward in time and looked at what you were doing, what would he think?
Uh, considering YouTube wasn't a thing at that time, I don't know, but I mean, I'd have to imagine you'd be pretty excited about it, you know? Just
Yeah.
and even at that age, I guess that would have been kind of right about the time, or just right before I was kind of turned on to gunpla. I think I
Mhm.
was probably around 11 or 12
Mhm.
when
Yeah.
Gundam first became a thing. So I mean, yeah, right around that time, I guess if I knew that it was something that I was gonna be making my living on, I guess I'd be pretty excited. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think about if 10-year-old John could know what I'm doing now. Number one, he would look in here in my man cave at all the model stuff I've got and say,
Mhm.
"Wow, this is cool." And then he would go, "Wait, you're married?"
Yeah. Yeah. Probably, yeah. That too.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, kind of along that vein, when you tell people who aren't familiar with what you do,
Mm,
when somebody says, "Hey, what do you do?" and you go, "Well, I make
mhm,
YouTubes about toy robots."
mhm.
Do you get some weird stares? How do you answer that? You know?
Uh, well, uh, not that much here because I think
Mm,
it's a different situation being here in Asia, in Korea, where Gunpla is pretty popular. People are
yeah,
pretty familiar with Gundam, so even people who have no idea what Gundam is, I mean, they may recognize the words, they kind of know what it is, but usually that's not what I start off with. If someone asks, I'll just say that I'm a YouTuber or something,
mm,
basically, generally, and then if they're interested, they might ask like what I do exactly
yeah,
on YouTube. Then I'll explain, and yeah, they'd say cool. They're
yeah,
excited,
yeah,
because I think because if they have any knowledge of the hobby at all, they just know that they know that it's something that not is not only kids. Probably a lot of, if it's like adults, men or women, they know they have friends, or if it's women, they have their husbands or husbands' friends. Probably have
mhm,
models around as well too. It's something that like it's mostly a men's thing, kind of like
yeah,
with everywhere in the world, but people know people who are into the hobby, so they know it's like it's not a weird thing, it's not a kid's thing. They
yeah,
just, wow, you must be lucky to be able to do your hobby as a full-time job. So I think people are pretty positive about it. Uh, in the States, however, I mean, I imagine it will probably be a different story. I haven't had that experience yet, but I'm sure
yeah.
some people will maybe
It,
be
it
a little
is.
bit.
It is a little different. I was a couple of years back. I was somewhere, and somebody who knew me said, "Hey, how's your?" At the time, I was just blogging. They said, "How's your blog going?"
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh, it's going pretty good. It's keeping me busy." And I said something like that. Well, they were with somebody who didn't know about my blog or what I did or anything like that. And they said, "Oh, what's your blog? What is your blog about? What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, modeling." And they went like that. They looked at me like, "What?" And I go, "No, no, 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 not runway modeling, not clothes modeling. I build plastic models." And they went, "Oh."
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, there can be different perceptions there, because I guess if you look at me and you think, "Oh, what kind of model is that?" But
Yeah,
yeah,
hand. You got
yeah,
nice.
maybe a hand model. Yeah. So to start wrapping up, what does the future hold for you? Where do you see things going, short and long term, for
Mhm.
you, your channel, and that?
Uh, well, I mean, basically, if I can just keep doing what I'm doing forever, I'd be happy. So that's
Yeah,
fine. Uh,
yeah,
but there's things that I would like to do. Like I said, I'd like to work on more weathering and things like that. So
mhm,
just kind of developing skills. There are certain skills that, I mean, certain things in the hobby that I'm honestly not that interested in. I don't really ever see myself getting into, like resin casting or stuff, for example.
yeah,
It's just that side of the hobby, or that aspect of the hobby is something I probably don't ever see myself getting into. Sculpting, things like that. Like I do enjoy a little bit. This is another thing too that I wish I had more time for, that I just don't. Is garage kit figure painting as well
yeah,
too. I've got like a couple work in progress around here kicking around,
yeah,
and a bunch more in the stash that are not even started. But that's something that I enjoy a lot to see, and I enjoy
mhm,
doing it. I just have hardly any time to do it, unfortunately. But I
yeah,
mean, doing more stuff like that, I mean, these kind of things I would be interested in. But as far as like sculpting figures and things like that's
mhm,
not something I'd ever be into. So, I mean, there's things that I would, and things I would not like to do more in the future in terms of like expanding my skill set.
mhm,
And then as far as like a content creator, I mean, there's really only so much that you can do with this hobby on YouTube. I mean, it's not like
yeah,
It's not like a video game. If I was playing video games, there's new games coming out all the time, and I guess even that too. I mean, it's just like new models coming out all the time, so it's maybe not that different. You're still
Yeah.
following basic formula. There's not so much that you can do to expand the format of that.
Yeah.
Um, but just I'm always looking, like I said before, I'm always looking to improve my content generally and just kind of change it up and find new things that people are enjoying. So I mean, I'll just kind of be doing that.
Yeah.
I would like to get into uh, more of like kind of the business side a little bit too.
Mhm.
And so later this year, I'm planning on we're moving back to the States, and I'll be working there at
Mhm.
USA Store with Adam,
Mhm.
uh, starting at like the end of this year.
Mhm.
And so once I'm there, I would like to be more involved in the business of it too. So like
Yeah.
working with different vendors, different companies, getting their products, and working on our own products as well too, USA Gundam Store
Mhm.
products, things like that. So I enjoy that
Cool.
aspect of it as well too.
Yeah.
And hopefully, if I'm able to, if people are actually able to travel, being able to travel to Japan and meet with companies and stuff like that, go to the expos and
Yeah.
things, talk about new products and stuff with companies. I enjoy that. So that's something I'm looking forward to doing more in the future. That won't be something that will be like in the public here on my channel, really necessarily, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah.
I do enjoy that. Mm.
That does sound exciting. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, and there's going to be links down below
Mhm.
to Zach's channel. I'll put down all the links. Zach's channel, the USA Gundam Store channel, and all of those things. And really, if you even if you're not necessarily a Gunpla builder, go
Yes.
check out his channel. Go check out his work. It's some really good stuff.
Mhm.
It has value. There's things he goes over how tos and other stuff, but there's also it's just fun to see these kits and how he puts them together and how he presents them. So definitely check his channel out. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. And I look forward to seeing more from you in the future.
Oh, always a pleasure, John. Like I said before, like you're someone who's got a lot of experience and a lot of modeling I really respect. So I'm always happy to talk with you and to share and be available for your channel and to bring you onto my channel as well too. It's always a joy. So I appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank
no
you very
problem.
much. I'd like to thank Zach for taking the time to talk with me. That was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed spending time talking with him. I've gotten to know him prior to this, so this is not the first time we've talked. And he's just a super guy, and I really, really do enjoy the work that he does. And I forgot to mention in the intro, he works very closely with USA Gundam Store. You remember I interviewed Adam Ryan from USA Gundam Store back in the November 2020 last Tuesday show. So it's kind of got the whole package now between interviewing them. So they're working together, and it's really cool to see the two of them quite often during the week when they talk about what's new in stock, not only at USA Gundam Store, but just talking about Gunpla in general. But anyway, check out Zach's channel. There's a link down below, and he's got a Patreon account, and I'm sure he would be grateful if you would consider him in that regard. And if you do get in touch with him because you saw him here, just let him know you saw him on this last Tuesday show, and tell him I said hey. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this January 2021 last Tuesday show. I had fun putting it together. There are links down below in the description to the various social media that I'm on. So if you're on one of those services, please do connect with me there. There's also, of course, the subscribe link, which is down here, I think. I never can remember. Is it over here? Or is it over here? It's in one of those two places. Anyway, I'd be most grateful if you would click subscribe and hit the little bell icon to know when I have new videos come out. And if you would, please give this video a like and drop a comment below. I'm trying to grow the channel, and it really does help me when you like the videos, leave comments, share them on social media. So I would be most grateful if you do that. There's also a link to Patreon down below, and I do have a Patreon account. If you'd like to look at what I offer there, such as the Kabuto-Kai that I mentioned earlier in this show, please take a look there and see what's available. And if you're already a Patreon supporter, thank you so much for doing that. It is a blessing to me and my family that you help us in this way, help me do this channel, help me keep this going in a way that, like I said, it's not just helping me, it's helping my entire family. So from all of us, thank you very much. And as I always like to do, I'll leave you with one final thought. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.